So I can't tell yet. Hey everyone, I'm not sure if we're seeing you. It looks like we're having some technical difficulty from our Wirecast marrying to our YouTube. Stand by. Can you check on the YouTube page and see, are we live? Looks good.
You're on.
All right, can you guys hear us? We good to go? Tell us know if our, all right, Paul, it's good, thanks. All right, we can't see right now on our screen. On one side, it's totally black, so we can't tell. Hey, Paul, let me, again, thank you so much for coming to this world premiere of, Make Them Count. This is a series that we wanted to start. It's all based off an article that I wrote about a year and a half ago, right after Vegas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right after Vegas, where it was an article called Make Them Count. And the concept behind it was basically, we had to really learn from these active shooter events. Countless angels lost their lives for us to learn these messages or learn these lessons. And we really need to start doing a deep dive on these events as a society and learning where we could have stopped these.
Absolutely.
So today's episode is going to be on Parkland, and it's the Parkland Active Shooter, and I entitled it The Complete Failure of the System. And that's exactly what it was. This is one of those active shooters that was 100% preventable.
Yes.
As you see, time and time again, when one of these events happens, it starts off typically, hey, there were no warning signs, we never knew, couldn't have been prevented, and then what do we find? There was hundreds of chances for them to stop this. This is one of those cases. Mm-hmm. This is a case where people even did things right, and the system let them down.
That's what's so frustrating about this one.
Yeah, that's what's so heartbreaking about this one, is that, hey, no problem. That's what's so heartbreaking about this one, is that people try to do some of the right things. One of the reasons why I wanted to start with this one is that a report was released from the Sun Sentinel. They did some great investigative reporting on the timeline from when the attacker entered the campus to when till the end of it, and we're going to talk about that. But the people who are asking me to do this are fellow law enforcement officers. As most of you guys know, my name is Jay Perry. Sorry for hitting my mic. My name is Jay Perry. I'm a former Navy SEAL, former Boston police officer and Boston SWAT officer, executive protection specialist, and general security expert. And my friends, and family who are still on the job called me once this report was out, and they kept emailing it to me and said, Jay, you need to tell people about this, because this is not the exception to the rule. They who are still cops, all around the country, are terrified that they are unprepared as well.
That it could be an article written about them if it was their school
Yeah,
instead.
And what they wanted me to do is to bring it to you, to bring awareness to the public that if you're counting on another human being to save your kid or save you, don't. Mm-hmm. All right. As we're going to see today, you cannot mandate bravery. We wish that, everyone who is supposed to be brave and run in and do the right thing would do the right thing. But you're going to see today that's not the case. It's one of the most heartbreaking and depressing things I've seen as far as a response from a law enforcement agency. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of great cops out there. Let me say, hey, David Phillips, great to see you. Hey, Carol, great to see you. Paul, great to see you. Deb, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Where was I?
You were talking about the shooting.
She never listens to me. I swear, I don't know sometimes what she's doing when we're doing these things. She's got her own internal dialogue going on. But basically, there have been countless, I know what I was going to say, law enforcement officers. So everyone knows who knows me knows I was a cop. And if you cut me today, I still bleed blue. You guys have the hardest job in America. I love and respect the heck out of you. But when we do something wrong, and this is one of those cases where gross negligence like negligence in the extreme and cowardice in the extreme, we have to talk about it. We have to bring this to light so that we stop hiring people who are going to do that. You know, we've really tried to become this all-inclusive police department in our hiring procedures, and we're not hiring warriors to do this job anymore. And active shooter is a place where there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
If you're the first one to respond, it doesn't matter that you signed up to be a community police officer. You're expected, and those kids are counting on you to go in there and put yourself in harm's way.
Not only who do you hire in the police force, but then who do you put in the school as a resource officer?
Right, like we just saw, you know, in Baltimore, an absolute, you know, ridiculous, insane decision to continue their policy to make school resource officers lock up their firearms before they go into the building. So now the only person there capable of stopping an active assailant or an active shooter can't do it because of politics, and that's too much what we see in this situation.
Well, and as you said too, that the history's been to put the close to retirement cop or the one who, you know, loves the kids and that kind of thing as the resource officer, because it used to be the least hardcore version of the job, whereas now you really want the opposite kind of person there.
Right, so, you know, and a lot of you probably figured this out already, but before active shooter became something that has permeated almost our entire society and has been on the front page everywhere, school resource officers where people went to retire or people who couldn't be trusted on the street were put in that position. People were not physically imposing enough where they could be nice to the kids, and that's what they would do. Also, your day tour tends to be your more senior people. For those of you who don't know, you know, police departments typically get assigned by shifts on seniority. So most people don't want, you know, the hard chargers get the worst shifts, or the, you know, or people who are on the hard charge want the busiest shifts, which tend to be your late night high crime time places. So that's where your quote unquote warrior officers go, and your daytime people tend to end up on the day shift, or people who have been on the job a while, might not be in the best physical shape, a little bit too much time at Dunkin' Donuts. Remember, if you see a cop out there eating a donut, take a picture of him, put it on Facebook, because they shouldn't be doing that. We all know, for real, all of us
only eat munchkins.
Only eat munchkins. They're gone in one bite. They have no calories, and there's no proof. So you won't perpetuate that stereotype. So let's get into this for everyone who's in here. We're not going to pull any punches today. We're going to break this down as honestly as we can and go over the failures of this where we can. We're going to play footage to you, and when I get to you some of the footage, again, because this is something we're doing new, there's a lot of different media going into this. Audio clips from 911, video footage, radio footage, all that stuff. So make sure you can hear it, and I'll ask you if you guys can hear it, and if you could just tell me in the chat, that would be absolutely amazing. So, let's talk about left of bang. What could have, you know, at some point, this monster was a sick kid. And you're going to see, Lauren's going to go over some points here, that this sick kid did everything he could for help, ask for help, other than say, I'm going to do this on this day, please stop me. And Lauren, can you talk a little bit about, you know, who, and I don't say his name because I don't want to give him any infamy. His name is mentioned here in the slides, but, you know, the attacker was a sick kid at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can you talk a little bit about that? Set the stage for them?
Sure. So, I mean, he was, as of age 4, he was diagnosed as being developmentally delayed. So he was showing indications of what ultimately was diagnosed as autism. And then he was combined as autism, ADHD, so at a very young age. And from there, he was pretty constantly, he was showing signs of aggression, whether it was against his sibling or his mother, or against, he had this kind of sick enjoyment of harming animals.
Right, we see with a lot of psychopaths, sociopaths, before they torture and hurt animals, before they start doing it to people. It's an escalation over time.
So that behavior was seen pretty early on, and neighbors were reporting, kind of seeing how he would like dissect frogs and toads in their yards, and one neighbor was describing how her dog had gone into some kind of like cardiac arrest, and the shooter was standing over him and getting this incredible enjoyment of her dog suffering. And so just things like that were these smaller warning signs that this kid was a little twisted, was a little off. He was suspended in 2012, so he was 14 at that point, for fighting in middle school. And over the next year, he had 26 different disciplinary incidents just in that one school year. So he was definitely showing signs of being troubled and acting out on that motivation in middle school. And this event obviously happened kind of once he was an adult in high school.
So I know that the previous administration, and I don't know if this directly ties into this, some kind of
that was the chair.
Holy smokes, I'm like, what the heck? But I know the previous administration had passed a bill where disciplinary kids wouldn't be kicked out of school, they couldn't be thrown out of school, enforcing them to do that. I wonder if that played a part in this. I don't know that.
He was transferred a year later to a school for students with emotional and behavioral problems. So there was enough of a consensus there after that year in 2013 where he had so many incidents. They decided that he was fit for a different environment. Prior to that, was when the mother had reported him to the sheriff's office for anger issues, saying that he had thrown her up against a wall. That was the first time that he was eligible to be held under the Baker Act, which is that involuntary committing. Yep. And mental health clinicians in that case decided he wasn't eligible for that. So that was the first time he could have been on the record as having kind of some mental instability, which would have gone to help prevent him from having access to firearms, but he was found not to be eligible to that.
How old was he at that point?
That was in 2013, so he was 15.
So at 15, he has his first legitimate domestic, right? For those of you in the law enforcement community, or Deb, I know that you're in a victim protection program where you help victims of crimes. So here he is. He should be on law enforcement radar. He's now a known domestic abuser. He's 26 cases. His school resource officer should know that this guy is a massive problem, right? He's been moved around, and we mentioned autism. So we have a son with autism, and we know that there was also another shooter who had autism, and that was the Sandy Hook shooter. Right, so again, we're starting to see common trends that are coming out here.
Yeah, and obviously, autism, manifests in so incredibly different ways, and sometimes that does come out as anger or kind of not the lacking of the ability to emotionally relate, which can then exacerbate as issues with anger.
So again, you can start seeing this case starting to move up. So what's next?
So later on, he was transferred to Stoneman Douglas. So he was brought back out of this school environment for kids with more the special needs and put back into the mainstream school, which is the school that ultimately, or the shooting happened. In that year, so 2016, so we're getting to be about 2 years prior to the shooting, is the first time that he stated, or that there was a report that he stated on social media about wanting to be a school shooter. Right. So up to 2 years prior. He had posted a photo of himself with guns, and this anonymous report was a concern about this post.
Was that one that was referred to the FBI?
I don't believe so. That one was sent from the sheriff's office to the resource officer at the high school, and nothing really happened with that one.
So think about that. You've got a kid who's been had 26 disciplinary actions. He's on the record being a domestic abuser with his mom, troubled, has all these signs and symptoms, and still we can't get it right at this point, right? To saying he wants to be an active shooter on social media, which, again, I really think that these big tech companies really have to start helping us with these problems.
And, and digging into afterwards, he was a very big video gamer, and he was constantly in those types of communities.
Yep.
And they found many group chats afterwards that he was talking about these kinds of threats and what he wanted to do, and comments from people who had seen him talking like this in these video game chats, saying, "Wow, never expected him to actually do it," and so. There was plenty of crumbs that he was dropping all along in the social media, electronic environments that he could have picked up.
Well, that's probably the only place where he fit in, right? In a shoot 'em up game on there. Again, I'm a gamer. I'm not coming out against games, but this kid who obviously had antisocial behavior, did not have social skills, who was struggling with all of these different types of communication with normal people in a normal way, what we would call normal, was doing everything he possibly could in his circle to get help.
Yeah.
And
so later in that year, he broke up with a girlfriend at the time, and then it sounds like he was blaming her friends for how that relationship fell apart, and he was threatening to kill them. He also, around this time, tried to kill himself. He ingested gasoline, and that's also when he was cutting himself. And so peer counselors at the school got word of all of this, activity. And that is when, at this point is when the counselors and the one school resource officer, which is Scott Peterson, who's the one who had many failures later in the actual event, were the ones that tried to re-implement the Baker Act, that involuntary committing.
So I believe it was like 10 of them, right? Is that correct?
What I was seeing was that it was a group of 3.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 2 counselors and then the resource officer.
Okay, so here we are. We have a kid who's a domestic abuser, a kid who's had 28 at that point. God knows what it became eventually. Disciplinary actions in school, who is now attempted suicide. So he's already proven he will kill him. He wants to kill himself. He's cutting himself, and we still can't get this right.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the Baker Act is the language is whether if they pose a threat to themselves or others, yet it was still determined that he wasn't qualifying as either of those.
I mean, how is that possible? He's tried to kill himself already, but we can't get him in help.
And he made direct threats to kill this ex-girlfriend's friends.
So imagine the ex-girlfriend's friends and family. And I don't know if they were involved in the school shooting or anything like that.
I'm not sure.
I don't know if they were part of that, but
as in victims.
Yeah, as part of the victims.
Not sure.
But here they are. We all have, not all of us. I've yet to have it with Connor, but as a cop, I've responded to threats against kids at school. I'm going to kill or I'm going to hurt or bullies and all that stuff. And it's got to feel so frustrating for a parent who you have this kid who's very sick. Still, he's not a monster yet. He hasn't hurt a person. I'd say he's a monster for torturing animals.
Yeah.
But he, in which torturing animals is a crime that you can go to jail for or should. And, again, we can't get it right. The system is still breaking down.
And so, and there's been a lot of confusion about how many times police had been called about him and then how many times they responded to his house. And there's been different numbers thrown about. There's been 23, 39. What I was finding is that the police were saying that there was 45 different times that they were called to the house, but that was between him and his brother, and his brother actually had the larger share of those reasons. So he just lived in a very troubled home, and so between the two of them, that was the reason why there were so many.
So they were fighting, or the brother was in trouble with the law?
Both. So it was people calling about the brother and then also calling about the shooter. Okay. So between the two of them, that's why that number of response was so astronomical. And a neighbor was reporting, and so, take this as you will, that it was a neighbor's report, but that the mom would often back down on the allegation once the police actually arrived.
Right.
So in the situations where like she might have been the victim of some kind of assault by the shooter or the son, when the police actually got there, it was, oh no, it's not really their fault. So that might have played some role into why the police didn't actively follow through on all of these in the way that we now say that they should have, if the mother was saying that, oh no, it really wasn't as big of a deal.
Right. So that's classic in the domestic dynamic that we see is in law enforcement and in counseling. The counselors will see this in domestic cases where in the moment they're scared, the victim calls, asks for help, and then all of a sudden they see their loved one could be in trouble. The loved one could be pleading with them, saying they're sorry, they didn't mean it, and they'll drop charges right there and they will back down from it. And that's really where a lot of these states, in an attempt to get things right, have instituted laws where you shall arrest, right? Where a dominant aggressor is going no matter what.
Yeah.
If we are called, someone's going. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that because sometimes it's just an argument. Sometimes it's just something, and when you take officer discretion away, but here's a case where, you can see, you're like, man, I really wish that had been in place for them because these officers obviously made some calls that I bet you that are haunting them this
and
day.
for some of, there's, I don't know if this complicates things, but at least for some of these, he was still a minor.
Right.
And if that impacts kind of their willingness to arrest on site or anything like that, I'm not sure.
They go down a different path when you start dealing with minors, but they still can go to juvie. They still have, in fact, they have more programs for kids that are kinder and gentler than your.
Well, and to that case, and so maybe it was something that they tried to do something lesser than arresting him, but the state welfare agency did open a case looking into his situation, citing medical neglect, and they were saying described him as a vulnerable adult due to mental illness, but 2 months later they closed this case saying that the risk was low.
Wow.
That he did have depression, ADHD, and then the autism, but he took his meds and he went to his appointments, and so he was okay.
Depression, attempted suicide,
yeah,
domestic abuse, so again,
I think he presented himself well,
right?
During the assessment, as far as that he was on his medications, he went to his counseling appointments, he didn't have signs, or he wasn't showing the self-injury in that period of time, so they felt comfortable closing the case.
Right. And I think this is a mental health challenge, this part of the mental health challenge that we all talk about, right? And, it used to be, and I'm not saying we need to go back to this, but it used to be we had, places, institutions where we would put people who were, crazy. I don't want to use that word crazy, but mentally disturbed people or people who couldn't adjust to society. And we had these facilities, and some of them were horrible. But I think that's part of the reason we're so resistant to put somebody in an environment that isn't 100% free, that isn't, that we're so resistant on labels, right? At calling things that it can really be to the detriment of society. How many more people do we need to lose on kids that we've identified as problems?
Yeah.
Look at the Colorado shooter. That guy had massive problems. You could see that he had issues from a mile away. This is another one of those cases. So what else you got?
It's just the incidents continue. As we're getting closer to the actual shooting date, he had other assaults at school. And in February of 2017, so we're at 1 year prior, he was expelled from school and he enrolled in an alternative learning program. And after that at this point he was 18. There's a few different reports. Someone believed that it was because he had threatened their brother. Another person was saying that it's because he had a knife at school. Okay. So that wasn't very clear. But at this point, he was 18, and he did start buying guns. He bought his first AR-15, and between that time and the shooting, they're saying he acquired at least 10 different weapons.
So he acquired 10 different weapons as a suicidal person with a mental health disorder.
And
right,
again,
on medication.
If any of those, the 2 attempts for the Baker Act had gone through, that would have pinged on his background check.
Right. So again, and this is something we see in the law enforcement community time and time again, is that failure to follow through, right? And, failure to go to court, to fill out the forms, to press charges, to take it to its completion so that these types of things, the Baker Act and others, will show up on their report, so they can't get a firearm legally.
Yeah.
You know, we all kind of just, we're all so busy, you know, and, you know, we may have the best criminal justice system in the world, but it still sucks. It's
Yeah.
not fun to be a part of.
And there's certainly, I mean, there were people who had these concerns. You know, after the shooting happened, there was many students and people who knew him who, before he was even named, said, I know exactly who did this.
Right.
And a good portion of those had seen all of these warning signs and they knew about his, you know, temperament and all of that, and they didn't do anything. But there were a good handful of people who did do the right thing,
Right.
And
The system
and then
let 'em down.
yeah, and so there were 2 tips to the FBI
Okay.
on him. One of those happened about 6 months or September of 2017, and so this was when he did a YouTube comment of "I'm going to be a professional school shooter," and that's the comment
Right.
that most people are familiar with. That
Right.
he posted that, and the person whose channel he posted that on did alert the FBI about that, and 2 agents went and interviewed him, and nothing happened with that. That was deemed not to. That didn't go anywhere, and then a month prior to the shooting, so January 2018, they received a tip. FBI received a tip. With things to back it up, but just saying that they were worried that he was going to be a school shooter, and they ignored the warning.
Wow.
So that they're investigating kind of what fell through the cracks in the FBI, but they definitely had the opportunities to stop it as well.
Wow, the FBI definitely has a massive black eye on this and a bunch of other things now, in my opinion. You know, they're too busy doing some things they probably shouldn't be doing and really need to get back to saving lives, which is, you know, what we all hope to do with this video. So the FBI is contacted twice, and as late as a month prior.
Or just over a month prior, yeah.
And do we know of any firings or any repercussions of anything that have happened?
I'm not sure. I know that the Broward County Sheriff's Office has justified a lot of how they responded and handled.
We'll get into that.
You know, I think they admit that there's a few situations that could have been different. They were investigating those internally. I'm not sure what the repercussions have been on any of those cases.
And again, this is all left of Bang. We're going to get into Bang here in very shortly. So do you have anything else?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I think there's kind of more of the same. One other thing from a few months prior to the FBI being tipped that last time, someone from Massachusetts, and I didn't see the link about how maybe it was a gaming situation or something that he got this. He called the Broward County Sheriff's Office as well, very concerned that the shooter was going to become a school shooter. The deputy who received that information at Broward County referred the call over to the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office because at that point the shooter his mother had died and he had been taken in from another family.
So it was a
So he was in a
jurisdictional-
different county, but that Palm Beach Sheriff's Office is claiming that they never received this information from the Broward County one. So another just slipped through the cracks, not sure exactly where that actually landed.
So as you can see, right, we're already, you know, this is an event that should have never happened, right? You know, constant letdowns by the system. And, you know, if you're one of these people, you know, who is reporting this, or you work in a school, or you know, are in law enforcement, or you see someone whose trouble is going on, you have to keep reporting it until you see movement, all right? And then stay on it. Because the squeaky wheel gets the grease in our system. That's just the way it works.
Absolutely.
And you just really have to follow through. You know, like I said, our our legal system and our court system may be the best in the world, but it still sucks. It sucks to go to court. It sucks to fill out police report. It's just not a fun thing to do. It's a pretty scary thing to do, you know, but it's our obligation. If we want to have 0 fatalities, these are the things we have to do before Bang. All right?
Yeah.
So now we're going to get into the Sun Sentinel piece here. And let me know when I'm going to throw it on over so you guys can see it. Let me know that if you guys can see my screen right now. How does that look?
So just chime in with a comment, if you will. If you are
You
seeing,
got it over there?
Yep, I'm watching for comments here.
All right.
If you guys can see, it says underprepared and overwhelmed.
So give us a thumbs up or whatever. We know there's a delay to make sure that you guys can see this, and I'll pop over to make sure that make sure you got this, because it's really important that you guys get this.
But, to kind of in summing up all of the stuff that happened with this guy prior to the shooting, we talk so many times about the indicators of violence and the importance to educate faculty, staff, and classmates on what to recognize, and then empowering them on what to do. Deb is saying that you can see, so that you're good to go.
Great.
But empowering them with what to do with that information.
Yep.
So it's so important for people to know how to handle situations like this.
Right.
A lot of people might feel like, yeah, I saw something, but it's not my responsibility, or I saw something and I don't know what to do, or they're scared. So educating on reporting is so important.
So is the text good? Like, is it the right size for you guys? It looks great on my screen. So this report was written by a Sun Sentinel reporter, and I apologize, I don't know their name. It's at the end of the article. And it was published on December 28, 2018. A lot of people don't know about this. A lot of people, let me say that a lot of police officers did behave heroically, and teachers and staff, and some of them paid for their life. And we'll go over those, and we'll try to highlight those as we go through this. But a lot of people did some really cowardly and terrible, foolish things. All right, so here's a minute by minute look of this. So at 2 p.m., at 2:19 p.m. and 54 seconds, Cruz comes onto the campus. And a campus watchman has a chance to stop gunman Nicholas Cruz before any blood is shed, but he doesn't do it. And again, this is because security there was entrusted to unarmed coaches, because, hey, they're buff coaches. Obviously, they're going to be able to do something. Mm-hmm. And you see this being played out across, are we going to arm teachers? Are we going to have security? One school resource officer per large school is really, they can't cover everything, right? So again, this is why training and infrastructure hardening and making smart decisions is such a big thing. So as you can see here, Cruz and Medina, security monitor Andrew Medina, an unarmed baseball coach, is riding in a golf cart, unlocking gates 20 minutes before dismissal. He sees Cruz walk through one of the unguarded gates with a rifle bag. Now, I believe Cruz is banned from being on campus.
So he had been banned the year prior to having a backpack because they had found what they were describing as bullet fragments in his backpack. And so at that point, while he was still a student, he was banned from having a backpack. I am not sure if that, he then was expelled. So I don't know if,
so as
part of the expulsion, he shouldn't be coming back. I'm not sure if the specific language of you can't have a backpack extended along with the expulsion.
Right. So as you can see here, he recognizes Cruz as Crazy Boy, the former student that he and his colleagues had predicted most likely to shoot up the school. That is a quote from them. He radios another campus monitor and coach, but he does not pursue Cruz and does not call a code red. They call their active shooter a code red. A lot of people call it different things, so when you hear us refer to code red, it's that. And again, I am using the attacker's name here just for clarity because there's a lot of names in here. So does not call a code red to lock the school down. As you can see, he kind of follows him over here. Cruz enters building 12. All right? That's where all the casualties for this were done. Medina shouldn't even have been in that job. School investigators had recommended he be fired for sexually harassing students, but district administrators overruled them. Medina is the first of 3 school employees who failed the call for a school lockdown after learning a gunman is on campus. He is on campus with a long bag. You'll see him. It's a gun bag.
Yeah.
And he does not call a code red, knowing that this is the guy that he's most concerned about.
So the Uber driver who dropped him off, some girl who was the person, had described what he was carrying as being a guitar case. So that might have been, she just didn't recognize what she was looking at. That's what she thought it was, but clearly it was what he was carrying all of his weapons in.
So 2:21, all right, in 16 seconds. Second unarmed monitor spots gunman, turns the other way. So you can see here, you got Cruz coming in the door, and you've got this David Taylor, the campus monitor, who was alerted by Medina, walks into the first floor hallway towards Cruz, who goes into the stairwell. At that point, Cruz has yet to pull his gun from the carry bag. Taylor turns around, later telling investigators he intended to use the stairs at the opposite end of the hallway to intercept Cruz on the second floor. So he sees this guy he's not supposed to be there. He's walking right towards him. He's carrying a gun bag, and he turns around and then says, oh, I was going to go up the other stairwell. Absolutely doesn't pass the smell test. That's failure number 2 on this day. And doesn't call a code red. The second chance to lock down the school is missed when freshman Chris McKenna enters the first floor stairwell and sees Cruz loading his gun. Cruz tells him, you better get out of here. Things are going to start getting messy. And you can see him right there. That's a gun carry bag. And I'm going to play this video for you. There's no sound to it. But you can see this kid come in. Again, I'm not going to, beat up Chris McKenna, who fled for his life. He was scared. He's a student. He's a kid. But these 2 other monitors, security monitors, should have known better.
It looks like that the student did do the right thing. He went to inform an
we'll
adult.
cover that.
Yeah.
So here's the video. You can see Cruz comes in, and this is really quick. This kid, McKenna, comes around the corner, sees him, goes to get around him, notices he has a gun, and that's when Cruz tells him, and then he bails. All right, McKenna runs from the building and informs Aaron Feiss, a football coach and campus monitor, that there is someone with a gun. There is no evidence that Feiss, who has a radio, calls code red. Again, you've got 3 monitors who have radios. You have 3 people that should have called something who have done absolutely nothing to protect this school, right? And this is one of the few, well, not few, this is one of the lucky schools that can actually do an effective lockdown because it was a brick and mortar building with solid doors and all that. And we'll cover that later. Watchman hides in closet at 2:21. Cruz fires his first shots, killing freshman Martin Duque. And if I mispronounce anyone, I mean no disrespect, I am sorry. Luke Hoyer and Gina Montalto in the hallway of the first floor. So he's on the first floor, he's starting to shoot. Taylor, the campus monitor, hears gunshots and races up to the second floor. He ducks into a janitor's closet. Taylor has a radio, but does not call a code red. Again, protecting their own skin, people who are in charge of protecting these kids are not doing their job. And this is some footage of people running up the stairs here.
I was like, even though, so he went to a place where he felt safe, so he found this closet.
And still didn't pull out his
the fact that
radio.
he still didn't, that's the part that's hard to wrap your mind around.
Right.
So even, the action to save himself versus others, as you said, you can't mandate bravery or anything
But
other
to
than
not,
that.
once you're locked up in a safe place, to at least give everyone a chance.
Right, exactly. That's the part that you can certainly follow. We have a comment from David Phillips that video feed went out of focus. Let us know if you are having any issues with seeing. I'll monitor.
I can back up and I'll leave it on there and we'll see that. So I'm going to play it. It's really quick, David. Tell me if you can see it. So I'll play it again here and maybe I can make it larger for you guys. So you can see Cruz, he basically puts in a mag and is ready to go. And that's right when he started shooting. So terrible stuff there. I hope that was better.
Yeah, so it might be, I don't know if internet is struggling to keep up with these videos, or we'll see. We'll just keep watching.
So school district policies were insufficient. Employees were uncertain on who could order the campus to be locked down, right? And we see this a lot. Schools too often want to put the power to lock down or communications or their mass text notification systems to put the power in the hands of all of their teachers to order. Mm-hmm. Everyone should be able to order a lockdown because every second after that first chance to call it is going to cost you lives. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, that was the case here yet again. So Cruz stalks the first floor unchallenged. He enters no classrooms and shoots through the windows at people in his line of sight, which is rare.
Keep going.
Which is rare. The fact that he didn't enter classrooms might mean that he might have felt vulnerable from going in there into the classrooms, which we know is where we would like to set up ambush points and all those other things. So he stayed out and only shot people he could see from the door, right? Which is actually a good thing because there are play corners, safe corners in a room that you can actually hide in, that they mention here later on that, some teachers actually knew, but only 2 did something about it. Cruz kills 6 students in these classrooms. Alyssa Al-Hadif? Al-Hadif?
Yeah.
Nicholas, Elaine, Helena, Alex, and Carmen. I'm not going to try to do the last names just because I don't want to ruin anyone's names. The simplest of security measures could have saved lives, but the school district failed to require that classrooms have designated hard corners. So they're calling them hard corners. We call them safe corners. And that's just basically a corner that's out of line of sight of the door. That is the safest corner for you to set on, that where bullets traveling in a straight line wouldn't hit you.
Yeah, and I mean, they're saying the school district failed to require that they have designated hard corner. More than that, it's the training. You know, even if you don't have your designated hard corner, if you've been trained to know where to go,
you paint your pin corner.
That's the important part.
People have to understand what to do.
But instead, you did see videos of these students who were live streaming the situation afterwards, and they were under all of their desks and
doing everything wrong that you possibly could do wrong.
Very visible from the door.
Right. So 2 security experts had advised Stoneham Douglas teachers and administrators to designate these safe spaces, but only 2 teachers at Building 12 did so. Most classroom corners that could have provided refuge were instead blocked by teachers' desks and other furniture. So the safe corner that they could have been in had a bunch of stuff in it that did nothing to help them. Mm-hmm. So again, poor training or no training costing lives, and we see that time and time again. So here we are. The gunman's been on campus for 1:44, and at 2:22 and 13 seconds, the first 911 call goes out, and we're going to play it for you guys. So here we go. Let me know if you can hear the sound on this, all right, guys?
911, what's your emergency?
Hello, we're at Stoneman Douglas High School, and I think there's a shooter.
Hello? You still there? Talk to me, please.
So, as you can hear, it's all, dispatchers have a tough job. We have friends that are dispatchers, and you don't ever know what you're going to get on the other line of those calls. And, that is obviously gunfire. That person actually does the right thing. But again, you're going to see that their system was not set up properly. And even this is delayed from an obvious gunfire in a school where every dispatcher in America should know immediately what they need to do. Every cop in the world should know what to do at this point because we've had so many of these. So 2:22 and 39 seconds. The repeated failures to call a code red become catastrophic when the shooting sets off a fire alarm. So the smoke from, what's up?
No, keep going.
So the smoke from the gunpowder and the fire at the end set off the fire alarm. I had heard he had pulled it. I guess the reports show that he had not done that, and that it was actually the firing that caused that to happen. So now the first floor knows what's going on because that's where it was. The second floor heard it because they were close enough. They went into lockdown. The third floor at this point, because it's a school with heavy walls and everything else, is has not heard anything and is totally unaware that this is going on.
Right.
So, again, no communication, no mass text notification system, no nothing. Complete lack of infrastructure for this to that is causing this.
Yeah, they were relying on the one capability they had, which was that loudspeaker.
Which was loudspeakers or the radios that 3 people who had radios refused to use, right? So when he sets on, instead of hiding in their classrooms as they would during a code red, some students and teachers stream out of the classrooms into the hallways as they would if facing a fire. At the same time, Deputy Scott Peterson, the school resource officer and the only armed lawman on campus, runs to meet with Medina, the campus monitor who saw Cruz first. And I'm going to play that for you here. So you can see them kind of hustling around. They start jogging over, and we're going to show you on a map where they went. He never goes into Building 12. He just sits outside listening to gunfire, and he does more harm. He does catastrophic harm in this situation. Not from his lack, but then him trying to cover his ass for not doing anything and directing everyone else to not do anything, which is unforgivable. So 911 delays. Broward County's disjointed 911 system slows the law enforcement response. Because the 911 call is from a cell phone, it goes to the city of Coral Springs, but the sheriff's office handles police calls for neighboring Parkland. So the Coral Springs operator must waste precious minutes transferring the call to the sheriff's office, and I'm going to play that for you here.
911, what is your emergency?
Yes, I just got a call from Douglas High School. A female on the line advised me they believe there's a shooter at the school.
Okay, at Douglas High School in
Yes,
what
in
city?
Parkland, 5901
Oh,
Pine
okay.
Island.
5901 Pine Island?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if they're working anything there. And it's second-hand information from a student?
A female called in. It sounded like possible shots in the background. I think I heard 5 or 6 in 2 different bursts.
All right, so as you can see, and you guys aren't going to see me while I'm going through this, I'm not high speed enough yet to ghost over the screens, and I don't want to add any confusion. I just want to work through this, and then we'll talk about it. So that other dispatcher, the one who took the first call, is doing the right thing there. He is basically calling the right dispatch, which is so darn confusing, and relaying it to the other jurisdiction, right, which is the Coral Springs jurisdiction. So here on the left, you can see one of the first heroes of this. Now, he didn't use his, radio to call a code red yet. I think he's the one who actually does at some point. But and we're gonna talk about that. But here you can see athletic director rushes to help, gets killed. Deputy Peterson and another campus monitor meet Medina, get into his golf cart, and drive towards Building 12. So as you can see, here's Building 12 in the red building here. Hickson is the one who goes in this west building. So and we're going to talk about him here. So athletic director and campus monitor Chris Hickson is already at Building 12. He enters the double doors at the west end of the hall and runs towards Cruz. So he's running towards the shots. Cruz shoots Hickson, who crawls to take cover in a nearby doorway. Cruz finds him 30 seconds later and shoots him again. All right, and then here is the incompetent response from Peterson, the deputy, who is armed and still has not made it to the fight, Medina, and another monitor. Basically doing everything they possibly can to do something other than go in. .237 or 2:23 and 17. I'm sorry. So we're now about 2.5 minutes in, or about 3 minutes in. Peterson finally arrives on the east side of Building 12. All right, so Peterson's finally are going to arrive on this side of the Building 12 here. All right, he draws his gun, but he fails to go inside a building. Let me explain to you what the procedure is for active shooter that every law enforcement officer, in the United States is trained for. When there's an active shooter going on, you push to the threat. You 100% push to the threat. You confront it. You don't set up a perimeter. You don't hang back. You take your firearm and you go to it and you kill the active shooter. Mm-hmm. That is your job. All right? Peterson, all right, so over the police radio, he says he can hear firecrackers or possible shots fired in Building 12. The statement conflicts with his later account that he was unaware where the sounds were coming from. So he knew where he was coming from. Now I'm going to play this for you.
17 Juliet 3, 17 Bravo 3, 17 Bravo 4.
17 Juliet 3, we have possible, could be firecrackers. I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired. 1200 building.
Attention all units in District 15. Possible shots fired at 5901 Pine Island Road at Stoneman Douglas High School. Possible shots fired at Stoneman Douglas High School.
Thanks, doing route.
All right, so again, you can hear the total chaos that's going on. You hear the shots fired over the call, and he does nothing. All right. Feist, the campus monitor and football coach, opens the door on the west stairwell. All right, so here you have the first floor, building 12. And the coach opens the door here. You can see this red dot, and the arrow right here is Cruz. All right, this is his path, for those you can't tell. All the red dots are people killed, and all the yellow dots are people injured. All right, so Feist, the campus monitor, the football coach, opens the door on the west stairwell, comes face to face with Cruz. Cruz shoots him. The carnage is astounding on the first floor, where Cruz kills 11 and wounds 13. All right.
And I mean, just in observing the locations, obviously, the first classroom that had the least amount of warning.
Right.
And depending on how fast he was moving, you can justify the response in the other classrooms. But when they were talking about the failure to have the designated safe corner, if as you look at that, the wall next to where the door is, if all of those dots had moved to that wall, that would have been a much safer place. Instead, you can see that they are completely in line of fire from the door.
Yeah, and I hope that makes sense to everyone. I'm going to pull up our faces here for a second, so we'll clear the layer. So I hope that makes sense. If you look at this map as we're looking at it now, so what Lauren's saying is where Cruz goes in, and that's where these little V marks, that's the door. So everybody in all these these corners that are far away, the safest corner for all of these is going to be this corner right here.
I can't see this anymore, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Is going to be, I'll throw that back up. So if you look where my cursor is, the safest corner is usually the corner on the same wall as the door, unless the door is facing that, right? Mm-hmm. Because bullets travel in a line, and they can, shooting through this door, they can hit all this. And you can see this, where people in the center of the room are the ones who are getting hit and killed. Mm-hmm. And what do you see Alice training teaching? The #1 course in the world right now in the United States teaches the worst training imaginable. They teach people to stand in the middle of the room and throw objects at the attacker, guaranteeing that they're going to get shot. It's absolutely reprehensible, and I don't know how many lives they've cost doing that. I mean, it's just shameful. So anyways, I'm sorry I got off on a tangent there. So again, teaching how to barricade, right? And teaching where to stack in your hard corners, your safe corners, and teaching people to prepare to ambush, would have saved a lot of lives this day. Mm-hmm. All right, and that's key. So Cruz heads up the west stairwell, as you can see here, to the second floor, but finds the hallway empty. Some teachers, probably hearing gunfire below, had taken steps to protect the children. They had covered the windows in the classroom doors so the shooter could not see in. Some huddled children away from the gunman's line of sight. Cruz fires into 2 of the 10 rooms, but no one hurts because he refused to go into these rooms. He knew he was on a clock. He knew his response time is, and he refused to go in. So he just fired in through the doors or through the windows, and no one was harmed on the second floor at all.
And as Jason said earlier, really the only reason for that is because they had been able to hear what was going on the first floor, not because there was any systems in place that actually helped with that response process.
Yeah. So they saved themselves, right? That's basically what happened. They didn't rely on anyone else. They heard what they heard, and they started saving themselves. Thank the dear Lord Jesus.
And so at that point, because at some point in here is when that fire alarm did start going off, but that second floor,
Yep.
they were confident that they had heard the gunshots, and so they knew not to
They knew not
evacuate.
to obey the fire alarm, which is key. And training to that is key. So again, I'm going to deputy hides from the crisis, all right? So it's all coming up on 4 minutes now. Deputy hides from the crisis. Deputy Peterson takes cover between buildings 7 and 8 as Cruz prowls the second floor. Instead of confronting the killer, he radios for a nearby intersection to be blocked off. All right, so let's get this straight. So instead of going to confront the killer, he's worried about traffic outside. That's that's total complete
The setting
utter
the
BS.
perimeter, that's how
Yeah,
people kind of
this is where he starts, blocking off in there because he doesn't want to go confront it. So he's trying to appear busy, which is disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. So I'm going to play that for you here, and then and we can listen to this together. So there he is. He's the only one within anywhere near anyone who has the power of stopping this, and he's worried about stupid traffic patterns.
And if we could just get an updated comment from people that video and audio quality are working for everyone, just so we know that we've got people where we need them.
So how are we sounding? Are we sounding okay? And is the video quality? I know it can be a little bit blurry, and I apologize. That's internet speeds. But we just want to make sure you're still with us and you're still getting this, or else we can wait for you guys to catch up.
So I'll just watch if anyone can chime in on that.
All right. So, of course, Peterson is still the only armed law enforcement officer on campus. We're up to 3 minutes and 54 seconds in a major metropolitan place, and we still have no police response there other than the campus officer, who's a total coward and is letting kids die right now. All right? All the security, not all the security, but 3 security officers did absolutely nothing. 2 sacrificed their lives. No one's called the code red. And that's where we're at right now. So the fire alarm's gone off, and Cruz is working his way up to the 3rd floor right now. As you can see here, building red, Peterson is taking cover in between 7 and 8 here, and there is the Medina. I don't know if there's another person under him, but Medina is the first one to see this whole thing and do nothing. Any replies yet on if we're looking good?
No.
Okay. All right, it's 2:24. All right, students on the 3rd floor are initially unaware that there's a shooter in the building, are now crowding the hallways because of the fire alarm. Now hearing shots, they begin to run back towards their classrooms. All right. Social studies teacher Ernie Rospierski directs students back into the classroom, but his door locks behind him with the keys inside. Kaspersky and several students are stranded in the hall. Cruz is on his way. Look at that picture. Look at all of those kids in the hallway.
Wow. Yeah.
It is a miracle that we only lost as many as we did. Dear Lord Jesus. Vulnerable on the 3rd floor. Cruz goes up the stairwell of the 3rd floor where the 20 people remain stranded in the middle of the hallway. He fires multiple rounds into the crowd. Geography teacher Scott Beagle is holding open his classroom door as he ushers students in. Cruz shoots and kills him. So that guy's a hero. Scott Beagle, as well as that football coach who ran towards the shooting, are heroes. They are doing what they said they would do, what they swear they're doing. They're trying to protect the kids. All right. So we're 4 minutes and 6 seconds into this. So now here comes the cavalry, right? Here comes the rest of them. Blocking traffic and failing to respond. Why? Because Peterson told them to do it. They're trusting the guy on the scene to direct traffic, the first responding officer. So not only is he cowardly and holding out there, but he's preventing anyone else from doing the right thing. And it really takes somebody with a smart and level head to be trained to recognize what's going on, to kind of overcome that friction of coming into a scene where one of your brothers is already there or sisters in law enforcement is already there doing something, right? So you can see Broward County or Broward Sheriff Deputy Michael Kratz heads towards the school. He stops near the football field 1,000 feet from Building 12 to block traffic. So he's 1,000 feet. So the second person arrived with a gun is now 1,000 feet from where the bad guy is. 2:24 and 54 seconds. You know, Cruz's assault, which would span 5 minutes and 32 seconds from first shot to last, is half over when somebody finally declares a code red. All right. Campus monitor Elliot Bonner calls the alert after driving his golf cart to the southwest corner of Building 12, where he sees Feist's body and hears gunshot. Bonner, who is unarmed, backs away from the scene in his cart. At least, as you can see here, here's Bonner right here on the west side of the building, and he backs way over here to hide around this corner. He's unarmed. They're shooting, but at least he picks up his radio and actually calls it, which should have been done right away when Nick Cruz first came on there. All right. Confusion about gunshots. All right. Deputy Kratz adds to the confusion with a radio broadcast. He says he hears shots by the football field northwest of Building 12 and raises questions about where the shooter is. So as you can see, here's Kratz. He's hearing echo, and you hear this in a lot, you know, in an urban environment, sound wave bounce off of buildings. In an urban environment, you know, or in a rocky environment, mountainous environment, sound bounces off a wall, so it can be misleading where it is. I'm not going to beat up Kratz. I'm not, you know, I sometimes find what the reporter's doing is nitpicking. He doesn't know where those shots are coming from. So to the best of his ability, he thinks they're coming from there. He's trying to provide more data. I don't have a problem with that. Okay, he's trying to get more data out to people. Is it confusing? Yes, all these situations are dynamic and confusing, and giving data is a very important aspect of this, right? They don't know yet there's only one shooter. How could they? Yeah. Right? So I don't have a problem with that, all right? But it does add to the confusion, as it always will, when we hear there's one shooter, two shooters, five. We don't know, right? It's multiple people who are just trying to do the best that they can.
Is that something that better training can help them isolate where gunfire is coming from?
Sure. I mean, you know, a lot of these guys have never even heard what a rifle sounds like. Never what a rifle sounds like in an urban environment with echoing and all that stuff. So, you know, somebody who had a lot of experience in urban warfare, been through a lot of, urban warfare training, would understand that and hear that. Again, but it would be hard to, almost impossible to pinpoint where it is, bouncing off that, depending on how it's coming out of that building. You know, so again, you know, I don't have a problem with this part of it. It just can be very confusing. So let's go back to the map. So let's report. We're going to play that recording for you here.
Tango 2, I hear shots fired by the football field. Shots fired by the football field.
Shots fired by the football field. Heard.
Right. Again, shots fired by the football field. What does that mean? Nothing. Right. There's possibly by the football field, there's shots fired. And, you know, I hope he heard those. I hope he wasn't being cowardly and just saying, I'm going to say I hear shots and take cover behind his car. I don't know that, so I'm going to just say he doesn't know what he's hearing and therefore is trying to give data. All right? So now let's look at some more bad decisions that school administrators made. Restrooms are locked and students can't escape gunmen. An earlier decision to lock restrooms because students were vaping in them now traps those who try to find refuge on the third floor. They have nowhere to hide from Cruz and his bullets. Cruz kills senior Meadow, Cara, and freshman Cara outside a locked classroom. They die huddled together. Cruz shoots senior Joaquin outside of a locked bathroom. All right. Proper training would have taught them to go out to flee. You got nowhere to go, get out.
And so this is the floor that they were in the process of evacuating for the fire alarm that they heard at the point that he was coming up the stairs. So these people were kind of caught off guard in the hallway. And that's likely why they were out there. If they had known that it was a shooter versus just the fire drill, fire alarm, I'm sure they probably would have made a different decision.
Totally confusing. Our heart breaks for everyone in there. This school gave them no chance. No chance. All right? And it's amazing, that as many people survived as they did. Teacher saves students at 2:25 and 30 seconds. Rospersky flees with 10 students towards a stairwell as Cruz fires down the hall. 2 of the students, James Gutenberg and Peter Wang, are hit. Wang dies in the hallway and Gutenberg in the stairwell, but others get away as Rospersky holds the door closed from inside the stairwell to keep Cruz from advancing. I can't make that picture larger, but there is that guy, and he is a hero. He has literally got his foot there against the door, and he is holding that door from opening to help those kids get out. I mean, that is, courage.
Yeah.
That is, courage, and that man is a monster as far as I'm concerned. I mean, being a badass.
Okay,
to be
wrong
able
kind of
to,
monster.
For him to have the courage to do that.
Yeah.
He's a hero.
Yeah.
He's a hero in the deepest sense of the word.
Oh, again, training as far as blocking and barricading doors. If you don't have items to barricade, we talk about how to use your body safely.
Yes.
Instead of using your body kind of in front, he was sticking his foot.
Right, he did the right thing there. And, and that really helped because it really appears that Cruz didn't do anything physical to try to break down any doors. Any resistance he met, he just flowed on. I mean, that's really what we're seeing here. By the time he is done, Cruz kills 6 and wounds 4 more on the 3rd floor. None of the dead are in classrooms. It's now been nearly 4 minutes since Cruz started shooting. Deputies Peterson and Kratz are still not going towards Building 12. Unforgivable. 223s. Let's talk about one of the things that did its job. Protected by hurricane glass. Unable to get to into the stairwell, Cruz heads to the nearby teacher's lounge. Cruz shoots at the glass, targeting students and teachers as they flee across the campus below. But the glass won't break, and no one on the ground is hit. All right, let's talk about this for a second. As you can see there, look at how thick that glass is. And, he really went to work there. So, bullet-resistant glass, hurricane glass, glass in skyscrapers, and now, our friends at Absolute Defense have some really thick films that go over conventional glass that make them, Absolute Defense has ones that go on Humvees and military vehicles in the Pentagon that will stop rounds.
Yeah, so there's grades of these
Right.
products. That some the bullet can get through, but the glass maintains integrity, so a person can't then get through.
Right.
And then it scales up to that it actually would stop.
Right.
Some hurricane glass is not going to have the same quality or ability as this one did to stop the bullet, and a bullet might go through. So just because you have hurricane glass, if you're thinking, oh, yay, my school has that, don't assume that it might be the same situation as
Don't
Parkland.
count on it, but it's a good precaution to have. And, sometimes if you can't afford the thicker stuff, having the smaller, thinner glass film will still keep the shooter out of a room.
Yeah, in a situation like this, he would have accomplished what he was trying to do, which is just shoot through.
Right, exactly.
He wasn't trying to get
But
out.
as
that
far
window.
as, like in Sandy Hook where he shot to get in, it would have prevented him from gaining access to the building, which is a win. All right, so imagine this. So now he's up on the 3rd floor and he wants to shoot down in Vegas style or Texas Bell style.
So we have a
from
comment that
elevator
says, "Go
position.
glass, better than cops."
Yeah, in this case,
Yeah.
these cops, not all cops, but these cops. All right, so, here we go. He's up there. He's trying to do, he's shooting out. He's not having much luck. Let's see what happens next. Peterson finally orders a lockdown. So here is the coward himself, Peterson's lockdown order. We'll play it for you. Deputy Peterson over his radio orders a school lockdown instead of ordering deputies toward the building. He remains safely outside. Piece of garbage.
Get the school locked down, gentlemen.
Get the school locked down, gentlemen. Absolutely shameful. More deputies hang back, even though they can hear the gunshots. So now they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cops there 6 cops by my count. I'm sorry, I missed Perry there. Eason, Seward, Perry, Goolsby, Kratz, and Peterson.
And what really would a lockdown order at that? I mean, the shooters inside.
At that point, it wouldn't have, you know.
You know, it's, yes, they might be trying to keep the other buildings
Everyone-
of the campus
right.
safe, but the shooter would have had to exit the building he was in. And so the lockdown order at that point is.
It's a moot point. That whole building's done, but he's locking down. Hopefully, the other buildings are at this point, right? I'm not going to, you know, beat him up for call. He should have done everything else up to that point, but, you know, if a lockdown hasn't been done yet, it should have been done at some point, and he's reinforcing that. Don't have a problem with that, other than he should have been telling, let's go, you know? So now you have 6 cops there. No one's going towards the building. And there again, you see 12. Peterson is not left, and all these guys are doing what he told them to do. Block the street, right? They're doing what the first guy on scene who knows the school best is telling them to do. I'm not giving them an alibi, but that's a little bit of inertia to overcome. 4 more Broward deputies arrive at the school, stopping north of the campus. All of them hear gunshots as Cruz continues to shoot in the teacher's lounge, but remain near their cars off of campus. Since Columbine, officers are taught to rush toward gunshots and neutralize the killer, but the first Broward deputies don't rush in. Let's talk about that. So in Columbine, it was, you know, this was the first time a situation like this had happened, you know, on a scale like that. So in Columbine, it was absolutely terrible. Most of the fatalities happened in the library. The SWAT team was literally there outside of that room, and they couldn't get the order to go in while those kids were being executed. And during the debrief, because it was, you know, they didn't understand that it was evil incarnate, you know, they should have understood, but they didn't. And their whole thing was, you know, hey, we're going to surround perimeter, call in a negotiator, bring the SWAT team, call them. You know, they just went into, no one thought outside of the box. Since that lesson learned, almost, 20 years earlier? Cops are taught to go to the threat no matter what. Don't stop to treat people. Don't stop to treat the wounded. Don't do anything. Go and stop the shooter from shooting more people. These guys knew what to do and didn't. Okay? That's terrible. So Broward Counter, this is unforgivable. And I don't know why anyone would do this. And Scott Israel was just suspended for this, and he should be fired. I don't know what the status is on him, and, you know, criminal negligence, in my opinion. Broward County, or Broward Sheriff Scott Israel, later reveals that he personally changed the department policy for active shooters to say that deputies may instead to deputies shall rush in. So he changed it from shall rush in to may rush in. Why on earth would you do that? Right? And then this guy who was trying to run for office, right, he had political ambitions off of this, rode the anti-gun train the whole way through all this. And I'm not going to get into firearms today, but this was his moment, right? He got up there. He tried to say it was not his fault. He was one of the primary causes of this. He's the one who trained this department. And you'll find out none of them can recall when the last time they had active shooter training was. All right, so back to this. Failing to take control. All right, the gunman arrived 6 minutes and 13 seconds, you know, prior. It's now 2:27 and 3 seconds. Sergeant Brian Miller, so the first boss gets on the scene. Sergeant Brian Miller stops north of Building 12. He is the highest ranking officer on the scene, but fails to take control or move from his car. All right. I don't know how long he stood there for that yet. We'll crawl through this, but he's going to get on scene. He should have announced, you know, whatever his call sign is, I'm on scene, I'm taking control of this, and started making calls. That's what he should have done. So as you can see, he goes here. Rather than rush in, he takes time to put on his bulletproof vest, hide behind his car on Holmberg Road, not going on the radio for 10 minutes. Again, unfreaking believable. I mean, this is a systemic failure in this department. Miller is among 8 armed deputies now at the school. All hear gunshots, but none rush to Building 12 to look for the killer. 8 armed officers, right? Time and time again, what do we hear? We're in schools. We're going to lock down. We're in the city. We don't need this. Cops will be here quick. Cops have been there. Shooting's been going on. People are dead, and they're still not going in. You can't. You are the first responder people, and I'll save that for later. Sorry, I get a little passionate on this. So deputies dawdle as shots fired. The last 5 shots can be heard on the body camera of Deputy Josh Stambog after parking at Holmberg Road near the scene of the shooting. He retrieves his bulletproof vest from his trunk, puts it on, and takes cover behind his car. After 5 minutes there, he gets into his car and drives to the other end of the campus to take position on the Sawgrass Expressway overlooking the school. The final shot Cruz fires from inside the teacher's lounge can be heard. It's now at 2:27 and 10 seconds, and I'll blow this up for you. This is really grainy on our screens. It's just cool on, a massive screen.
Shots fired. All units on the shots fired, stay on main. All the 7 units, go to Bravo. I need a unit to the firefight.
Bravo 3, we need somebody to shut down Holmberg at Pine Island.
Unit to shut down Holmberg, advise.
Holmberg shut down. We're one of number 13 of the 900 building. We have shots fired. I'm trying to get a defense open.
Building 13 and 900 building.
Gerard, do not approach the 12 or 1300 building. Stay at least 500 feet away at this point.
All right, the last thing you heard there is going to come up here in a second. And that is Peterson, the coward, ordering every other cop to stay 500 feet away. I mean, you can't even write this novel.
And so that's saying, so we're at time since gunman arrival is a little over 7 minutes. That's how long the attack was going on without.
Yeah. So Cruz escapes. Cops have no idea. Cruz takes off his rifle vest, drops his AR in the stairwell, and heads down the stairs, darts out the building, and runs across campus, all while police think he's still inside. So you can see here, he comes out of the teacher's lounge, goes down the stairs, and out the first floor of the west where all those, where the coaches were shot and killed. You'll see him running here. Again, not a cop on scene that you can see there. All right, cops protect themselves. And this is what you guys just heard, and they'll play it again because it's so appalling. A few seconds later, Peterson, still hiding southeast of Building 12, tells deputy over the radio to stay at least 500 feet away from the building. And here it is.
Gerard, do not approach the 12 or 1300 building. Stay at least 500 feet away at this point.
All right, let's talk about this.
We have a comment. Isn't it their job to rush in and take down the threat?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So again, I'm going to repeat this for probably the 5th time during this podcast because this is so disgusting. Cops since Columbine are trained to rush in and kill the attacker. Kill or subdue the attacker. All right, that's what they're trained to do. All right. They absolutely did not do their job. And, a slight alibi. It's not, I'm not going to. The only caveat to this whole thing is that the guy who's been on scene the longest, which is Peterson, who's a school resource officer, who is first on scene, who knows that school better than everyone else, has been directing and keeping everyone away from the building the whole entire time. So these cops are trying to support their guy, possibly support their guy who's in the fight, right? They don't know where he is. You know, they know he sure as heck isn't in a gunfight, and they should be saying, wait a minute, why aren't we going after this? Every shot is another kid dead. Why aren't we pushing this threat? But there is that slight inertia for them to overcome, right? Where the boss on scene, at a minimum, that sergeant who rolled up, should have recognized that and fixed it.
So just because a school resource officer is the most familiar with the location, someone that's above him would be taking over that scene as soon as they were there. Is that correct?
Yes. So lots of different departments are trained to do several different things. You're going to see this later here. So the policies evolved over time. Now, a lot of departments are training. Single officers are allowed to go into the building alone. All right. At different times throughout this whole evolution of active shooter, it used to be the first three who get there get into a formation and go. They would form a T, right? And they would go. Then there's the diamond formation, which is 4 officers, 1 on front, 1 on each side, 1 in the back, and they would just blow through everything. Now, the dominant thought is solo officers should be responding to because every delay waiting for somebody else to get there, particularly in rural counties, like it might be 20 minutes till you get your second officer there. You can't wait that long. Right. So, good question. Yes, he should have. Let's go back to this. The warning is one of at least 2 times Broward deputy urges another officer to protect themselves and not confront the killer. Though police officers since Columbine have been trained to immediately confront the killer, some Broward deputies at the Parkland massacre would later struggle to recall when last they had active shooter training or the details of what they learned. Piss poor training. Now this is embarrassing, even more embarrassing. Fooled by video delay. So Cruz is out of the building right now, all right? The surveillance camera in the schools are not monitored in real time, which is what we see an awful lot. Assistant Principal Jeff Morford and School Security Officer Calvin Greenleaf enter the school's camera room to rewind and review the surveillance video. Deputies don't realize the footage is delayed 20 minutes. Morford relays information about Cruz's whereabouts to Peterson and other school officials. Cops, believing the video is live, continue searching for Cruz in the building, delaying aid to injured students. So he is gone. It's 20 minutes old footage. They're calling out movements. They can see he's not on the floor, but they don't realize it, and you'll all see this. It's embarrassing. Terrible. Incompetence. Sheriff Commander is overwhelmed, and this is another 0 who showed up. Broward Sheriff Captain Jan Jordan, head of the Parkland District, arrives at the school's administration building and is quickly overwhelmed as she tries to coordinate officers. The faltering radio system frustrates her. She spends her first 7 minutes at the school in the administrative building and then goes to a nearby car to try again with the radio system. She eventually moves to another area near Building 12 where she takes cover behind a car to meet with officers. As you can see, this is where she came on scene.
Right. So this is the police officer's radio system or the school's radio system?
The police officer's radio system. All right, they should have had a command post set up. When something like this happens, and that's what we're going to talk about. The first thing should have been get in there, blah, 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 all this stuff. And then everybody, as they're going in, pushing to the threat, supporting that threat, command post gets set up to treat the injured, everything else, and all that stuff. We're going to talk about that. So here we go. So now you still, at this point, have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 officers and no one's in the building. All right. And we're going to show you footage of her coming into the administrative offices here and just pacing around. All right. The sheriff's office fails to immediately set up a command post, just as the agency failed to do after a mass shooting in Fort Lauderdale Airport the year before. All right. Just as the agency failed to do after a mass shooting at Fort Lauderdale before. So they've had this happen before, and they didn't fix a darn thing. A Broward deputy asked the command post to be set up to help control the response, but it isn't done for another half hour. We'll play that.
17Q04. Let's get a command post set up on the south side of the Sawgrass in Coral Springs off of Pine Island. The gate for the student entrance is unlocked. We need to get units in here so we can start trying to find this guy.
All right. Finally, a police department that knows what the frick they're doing shows up, and that's Coral Springs. If it wasn't for Coral Springs, Broward County would probably still be outside the building right now. Coral Springs police officers rush in. The shooting has been over for 5 minutes before any police officer enters the building. 4 Coral Spring officers enter through the west door where they see Chris Hickson shot. 2 officers pull Hickson out of the building and onto a golf cart. He will not survive. So that's a mistake, right? They should have pushed into the building and attempted to find the guy rather than slowing down and doing this. They enter the building in a quasi-diamond formation. It's pretty sloppy, but at least they're going in. All right?
And at this point, there haven't been shots.
There haven't been shots. They haven't heard anything right now. So they don't know what's going on. They just know there was shots there. They were the last to arrive on the scene, and finally someone has the intestinal fortitude to do what's right.
And so we have a question that says, why was their video feed set up with a 20-minute delay in the first place? That's because they had to rewind it to watch.
Exactly.
So it was a self-imposed delay, and
Yes.
they weren't relaying the information as such.
Exactly. You'll see it. It's awful. So let's.
And that is the information that these Coral Spring officers are operating on. Is that correct?
Yes. So as you can see, one guy's standing in the doorway. I don't recommend you do that. And it looks like they're scanning around. He's calling out what he's seeing. He enters alone. Then his 2-man comes in. 3 officer comes in. 4, they're in just in a mess right there. They go and they drag the injured guy out. I don't know if they show that here. They cut it off because they don't want to show any victims. Again, not the right thing to do. They're doing better, but they should be actively blowing through all this. They should be moving as fast as they possibly can, with everyone with a firearm pointing in a different direction, covering them to see if a bad guy comes out. That's how they're trained to do this. How they should be trained to do this. So as you can see here on the map, this is where they are. The Coral Springs officer later tell investigators their training was clear. Run towards the gunfire. Coral Springs officer Raymond Kerner, the school's resource officer at a nearby high school, would tell investigators, basically what we're trying to do is get right to the threat as quickly as possible. Take out the threat, because every time you hear a shot go off, it could potentially be a kid getting killed or anyone else getting killed for that matter. All right? So
the right thing.
That's the right thing that they should be trained. That's how they're supposed to act. Commander fails to act. Captain Jordan orders that a perimeter be established around the school, a misguided approach when facing an active shooter. Before Columbine, setting up a perimeter was standard. After Columbine, police were trained to rush towards the gunshots. Jordan does not establish a command post or call for officers to go find the shooter. Again, totally overwhelmed. She's in over a league, has no job being a cop in my opinion.
And so at this point, we have the Coral Springs who are doing one set of actions, and then the Broward County doing another.
It's amazing they didn't have blue on blue.
Right, and so they're not operating under a single commander.
No.
They're making their own decisions.
They're making their own decisions. Coral Springs said, screw it, we're going in. Broward doesn't even know what the hell's going on. And it's amazing that when the multiple agencies are entering in, they don't break it down, but typically I know in jurisdictions that I've made in, they would make one channel where they would marry everyone's radios together and everyone would be on one channel. You can do that. Like I know Boston could do that, where different districts would communicate with one another. In this case, they're coming from different jurisdictions. I don't even know if they have that capability. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing that another cop didn't shoot another cop, like just happened in the last shooting in California at the country country place. That was a cop shot another cop and killed him. So here, we'll play this for you.
1701. I want to make sure that we have a perimeter set up and the school's being all the kids are getting out, so we need to shut down around this school. Does the Delta unit have a place where we're setting up for all the units coming into the area?
10-4.
And do we know whether the Coral Springs officers that were on site were aware of the response that Broward County was doing at this point, or did they think that they were also in the school, or
I don't know.
Did they know that they were acting incompetently?
That's a good question. From what I've heard, and again, this is heard from the law enforcement community, is that they got frustrated with the lack of action and they just said, screw it, we're going in, is what I heard. Again, I may be wrong there. That's secondhand information, but that's just what I heard. So more bad information. Deputy Peterson adds more bad information to the chaotic scene. Still sheltered by the building, he tells Coral Springs officer the shooter is on the second or third floor. In reality, Cruz has been out of the building for more than 6 minutes. First deputy inside. Broward Deputy William Hanks enters Building 12 through the west doors 1 minute and 45 seconds after Coral Springs officers first entered. All right, this is 13 minutes and 10 seconds after Cruz came on scene. Since the gunman's arrival, the first Broward County person goes into the building. More officers rush in. About 18 officers, the majority from Coral Springs, head in the east side of Building 12 about this time. It is amazing that no one shot one another. You know, it's good that there was no shots being fired at that time, because it
lowered the stress a little bit.
More sheriff deputies begin to enter the building as well. As you can see here, they're now entering from the east and from the west. All right, 2:37 and 18 seconds. Without command post established, deputies remain confused about who's in charge. Broward Lieutenant Stephen O'Neill takes command of the response early on, recognizing the lack of direction from supervisors. He later says Jordan had a dreamlike nature to her speech and that she was not engaged with the problem. O'Neill works to keep the roads by the school clear for responding vehicles and to create an area where officers can stage their response. But by doing so also slows police response into Building 12. Evacuation from Building 12 at 2:40. All right, so now we're 17 minutes and 24 seconds of this. Officers begin a mass evacuation of survivors from Building 12. 2:53. All right, gunman long gone. Assistant Principal Morford in the video room broadcasts over school radios that Cruz is leaving the third floor and heading to the second floor. Officers believe Morford is watching the video in real time, but in fact, Cruz has already walked to a nearby Walmart in order to drink at a Subway. Video from Sergeant Richard Rossman's body camera shows officers relaying Cruz's movements over the radio and Assistant Principal Winfred Porter outside with the police incorrectly live footage, even though there's no person moving around in front of them.
Well, and consider the time discrepancy. So he exited pretty quickly after he stopped shooting. But think about, they're watching this and how much time has passed since they heard gunshots.
Yeah, yeah.
And so just
really
the fact that they
boggles,
didn't put that together.
You just really, you know, it's the worst case scenario you could ever imagine. So let's
And I'm
play
sure
this.
this is timestamps too, the video that they're watching.
Not that I know of. I'm not sure because I'm not on that side of the building.
Is this live info? This is live?
Nobody else get on this radio but the camera guy.
Sir, stay up the phone. I don't know the school like you do. I need this information to relay it on the radio. No, I don't know the school. When I tell you, ask you a question, give me an answer.
That's our director.
Okay, where was he last? This is live right now.
He just said he's walked down back to the second floor.
He's walked to the second floor or the first floor?
No, back to the second floor. He went to the third and said he went back to the second floor.
This right now.
It'll override everything. Yes, get the white male, correct? Yes. Correct.
701, 1033 for a minute.
Man, I'm trying to think of that kid's name.
Traffic, 1033 only.
No, we can't.
They are monitoring the subject right now. He went from the third floor to the second floor. Third to the second floor. He may have a gas mask on now. Stand by for further. They're monitoring him on camera. Sir, what else?
That's all they said.
Where at? What exact room?
They didn't say what room yet.
What building?
1200 still. Third floor. Back down to the second floor.
So, It's absolutely, the worst case scenario. Cruz on the move. Cruz leaves Walmart, heads to nearby McDonald's. He stays there a minute and then leaves. Officers finally reach the third floor. That's a victim there. 3 Coral Springs officers reach the third floor and find Cruz's gun, vest, and body of Jamie Gutenberg. Deputies in Building 12 still believe the gunman is inside and are experiencing radio problems. Body cam video records one deputy saying he needs to go outside and use his radio. Right now you see them all stacked on the stairs. No one's pushing the threat. I mean, this is the worst you can imagine.
We can't see up here. There's no problem. I gotta go back outside.
All right, so they've got some serious firepower on scene, and no one's really being aggressive. Cops finally learn the surveillance video is delayed. Sergeant Rossman has known for 7 minutes at the time when every minute was critical, but he has not broadcasted over the radio until now, and here it is, him saying that.
Stand by for further. He dropped the bag near the stairwell. Stand by for further. Golf 1 on 48, is that from recording? He's exiting the school? Yes, sir. They're following him. It's about a 20-minute delay. They're following him on video, on the camera. They had him exiting the building, running south.
I mean, I can't even imagine how humiliating that is. School resource officer Peterson leaves the spot where he has remained sheltered for nearly 48 minutes, watching as other officers enter the building. That's the coward right there. So at 3:17 and 45 seconds, almost an hour after the shooting began, officers entered the final room in Building 12. So, so that was really, really hard to watch. I know, I wish I could say that I'm surprised that police departments behave or are that ill prepared. You got to understand that training has not been a priority in this factor. After the previous administration, there was a massive push to be officer friendly and to be community policemen all over the place. And yeah, Dave Phillips, no CQB training. That is 100% right. And so they went into programs of how to hug a felon instead of teaching their officers how to protect our kids, and that's unfortunate. As you see, so I've had tons of officers reach out to me and say, Jason, you have to show them how bad this was. That is what's protecting your kids more often than not. And there are good cops out there. I mean, brave, amazing brothers and sisters out there who are doing this job to the best of their ability, who are heroes, doing the hardest job in America, all right? But, they're all human, all right? And they all work for these departments who are run by politicians. And politicians are the problem when it comes to this. Politics is the problem when we come to active shooter. Too many people inject their politics into the solution of this equation. And I'm going to exaggerate slightly to make my point. If you're on the right side of this equation, you think every person should have a rocket launcher in their back pocket. If you're on the left side of this equation, you want to uninvent firearms, knives, and automobiles and turn it into a Nerf world. All right? Neither one of those are going to happen. We have to train our people to be their true first responders. All right? And then we need to do some infrastructure spending. This is I hope is an eye-opening experience to everyone. My intent was not to beat up on law enforcement as a whole, just what we saw there. There's a couple caveats that I mentioned. One is Peterson, I believe, is responsible for majority of the blame. there for, ordering people away and trying to, there's a lot of peer pressure for not to overcome that. I wish guys had done it, but there's a small part of me that understands that. All right. The second part is this happened quick. This wasn't a Columbine where the standoff was a really long time. This wasn't Paul's nightclub. This was over in relatively a short amount of time. Yeah. So processing, taking things in, it was a rapid situation. He was in and out, right?
Seven or so minutes.
Yeah, 7 or so minutes, right? So again, hey, we got a great teacher from Peter Joyce at SRT Concepts, which is a great shooting company, firearms instruction company up in Maine. Do I think armed teachers would have made a difference? In this case, I think anyone armed who was willing to enter the building would have made a difference.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an interesting situation, because being that he didn't go into those classrooms, a teacher having a gun in the classroom, if they didn't choose to leave to confront him, may not have had any impact.
Exactly.
If it was someone who had that firearm plus felt confident enough or had, gutsy enough to go out in the hall to confront him, then certainly they could have made a difference. Yeah. So it's a different situation than the gunman walking into the classroom and the teacher defending that space.
Peter, you and I can train somebody in a really short amount of time to barricade themselves in a classroom, take a firearm. Hey, Eddie, you're welcome. Thank you very much. To take a firearm, to take a position of cover, aim at the door and hit a man-sized target coming in safely, right? So if the attacker comes in, there's no kids running by to make that shot, all right? I am not sure you can make a teacher a CQB expert to go clear buildings and in a professional manner, in a realistic manner.
I guess technically, if he had to be in the doorway in some capacity to shoot in, and if the teacher was shooting back at the door, that might have prevented, but they would have potentially exposed themselves to the
So that is my thing. I don't think most people are qualified. Do I want everyone to be brave enough and to go and confront the shooter? I absolutely do. But most teachers, I would teach them to protect their students in their classroom, to barricade effectively, take their firearm and hold it on the door. And if someone came in, that's an easy shot, where it's a low risk shot, meaning that they have very little chance of hitting, anyone that they shouldn't. Teaching somebody to go deal with, 50 kids running down the hall, that is,
especially on the third floor where everyone was evacuating the hallways, and so then if you did have a teacher, an armed teacher.
We have a question from Awakened Angel 72. When you go into any federal building, you get searched and scanned, and several security or police are at the door with one way in and one way out. I feel we should protect our children the same way. I'm a big fan of that. Metal detectors, but here's the thing with metal detectors, all right? Metal detectors force the confrontation at the point of entry. All right, what do I mean by that? Meaning if you just have a metal detector and not an armed guard there, or somebody trained who's armed to end that threat, you're doing no good there. They're just going to walk through, and it's the same as shooting glass. It'll beep, 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 and they'll do it. You see it in the movies, right? So having people there, right, who are trained and equipped to stop that threat, you're forcing the confrontation in one area, which I think is a good thing.
Consider, though, this is a high school that was a campus, and then there's going to be colleges that are even more buildings than that.
Right.
So each building is going to have an entry point that then you're having that metal detector and the person to guard it. So it's more than just one door.
So then you have one in every building. Do you have one on, in vast campuses? Do you force everyone through one gate? Like a Patriots game. That's 6-time world champion Super Bowl Patriots. Like a Patriots game where you force them through gates and you have that stuff there. I think we should be doing things like that. I don't want to turn our schools into prisons, but I think the technology is evolving fast enough, and that with armed personnel on site is a good answer, as well with training, because you have one cop there, okay, somebody walks up, hey, whatever, boom. You don't know if that cop's going to be alert that day or whatever. Anybody, Chris Kyle was ambushed and killed. The deadliest sniper in history. So again, you have to train. You have to train each and every kid to be their first responder and to make decisions based on what they're seeing and their current reality is at that moment. Thanks for the stop them at the door. I totally agree with you. Awakened Angel 72. Do we have any other questions out there? I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you found this valuable. We're going to break down, this is just the beginning of this series. We're going to break down every active assailant that's happened and go over lessons learned from that. We're not always going to have a cool little article and all this stuff here. A lot of it we're going to have to pull in ourselves. This Sun Sentinel reporter, I give them props. They did a good job in a pretty apolitical way. So again, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this. I can't believe I've been on the air for how long?
It's an hour 45.
Hour and 45 minutes. For those of you who hung in there, thank you so much. Please, 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 we're trying to grow this channel and we're trying to save lives. That's our only motivation. Okay, Eddie Schultz, Jason Awakened Angel was on scene at the Pulse nightclub, not inside, but there. All right, so then Awakened Angel, you know what this looks like. That the Pulse nightclub, we covered that. That was again some more gross negligence. It was an absolute disaster. Law enforcement has got a really big problem right now, where they are, they're supposed to know what they're supposed to do now when there's shooting still going on, and then shooting stops, and then they try to treat it like a hostage situation when it's not.
It seems like, at least half, if not the majority of these situations afterwards, the police response has been inadequate.
Yeah. And it's an impossible situation, right? But we have to at least be competent and save as many lives as we could, right? And that's why don't count on someone else saving you. You are your first responder.
Well, because then, you have the Capitol Gazette shooting that happened, was that last year?
Yeah.
And police were there and responding in sight within a minute or 90 seconds, and 5 people still were killed. So even if they do things right and they enter quickly, it's still a high casualty possibility. So good response or not.
Please, please, please share this. Like us, subscribe, and help us get the word out. We really just want to save lives. We also have our tridedandshield.net website where we have active shooter courses for school and workplaces currently that we offer to the public. So Awakened Angel 70, drove right past it while it was in action. They lied about that and took 3 hours to get in the building to save lives. Yeah, awful. I'm going to get into the Vegas one. Eddie, I know a lot of people really are waiting for that one. That one's coming. It's just going to be a really deep dive, and I got to gather a lot of data for that. I think we're going to start. Our next one's going to be the Texas Bell Tower, which is the first one. So, David Phillips, hey, I haven't seen you in forever, brother. We got to get a beer sometime. If you're ever in town, I'd love to do that. So, Dave Phillips, you're a great guy. Good seeing you. Thank you for your kind words. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for this long episode. I hope you learned something. Please share this and spread the word. God bless you and God bless America. Trident Shield.
Thank you.
Out.